Today I know I'm putting some graphic things on YouTube, but I'm wanting to show what Jesus Christ suffered for us. Just open up to reality. I just put out a short video about scourging. Jesus Christ was scourged before he was on the cross. He was beaten and whipped. And I'll show you the picture I have, which shows the scourging, what they did to him before he was even on the cross. If you can see that very good. In my way here. Where he was on the post and he used the whip like he did. And see how they whipped him at an angle? Stripped him naked and beat him and tortured him. And that would have opened up, exposed his back. And I understand when he was on that cross, to breathe you had to pull yourself up, and every time he did that, that rubbed that back up and down. So I want to go into crucifixion, what a crucifixion really is. Crucifixion probably first began among the Persians. Alexander the Great introduced the practice to Egyptians and Carthage, and Romans appear to have learned of it from the Carthaginians. Although the Romans did not invent crucifixions, they perfected it as a form of torture and capital punishment that was designed to produce a slow death and maximize pain and suffering. It was one of the most disgraceful and cruel methods of execution, usually reserved only for slaves, foreigners, revolutionaries, and the vilest of criminals. Roman law usually protected Roman citizens from crucifixion, except perhaps in the case of desertion by soldiers. In its earliest form in Persia, the victim was either tied to a tree or was tied or impaled on an upright post, usually to keep the guilty victim's feet from touching holy ground. Only later was a true cross used. It was characterized by an upright post, stripes, and a horizontal crossbar, patellum, and was several variations. Although archaeological and historical evidence strongly indicates that the low-tall cross was performed by the Romans in Palestine at the time of Christ. Crucifixion practices often varied in a given geographic region. In accordance with the imagination of the executioners, and the Latin cross and other forms also may have been used. It was customary for the condemned man to carry his own cross. As we see here, I'm going to throw this up to you real quick. If you look up there, you see the man carrying the cross beam. He didn't carry the whole cross, he carried the beam that would go on top of the cross. From the flogging post to the side of crucifixion inside. As I showed you I'll throw this one up here. I got paperwork everywhere, I apologize. As we say, he was flogged on a post before he even carried his cross. He was usually naked unless there was prohibited by local customs. Since the weight of the entire cross is probably well over 300 pounds, only the crossbar was carried. So everybody thinks Jesus Christ carried the cross. He only carried the crossbar. The whole thing would have been too much for him to carry. The patellum, that's the crossbar, weighed 275 and 125 pounds. That was placed across the nape of the victim's back and balanced among both shoulders. Usually he outstretched his arms and were tied to the crossbar. The professional site of the crucifixion was led by a complete Roman military guard headed by a centurion. One of the soldiers carried a sign on which the condemned man's name and crime were displayed. Later, the titulus, which was the name of the sign, would be attached to the top of the cross. The Roman guard would not have leave the victim until they were sure of his death. Outside the city walls was permanently located the heavy upright wooden stripes on which the patellum would be secured in the case of the tall cross. This was accomplished by means of torus and tenon joint, with or without enforcement. In other words, they raised him up to the cross. By ropes, to prolong crucifixion, a horizontal wooden block or plank serving as a crude seat often was attached midway down the stripes. Only very rarely, and probably later than the time of Christ, was additional block employed or transfixion of the feet. At the side of the execution, by law, the victim was given a bitter drink of wine mixed with myrrh or gall as a mild anesthesia, in other words, to help with some of the pain. The criminal was then thrown to the ground on his back with his arms outstretched along the patellum. The hands would be nailed or tied to the crossbar, but nailed apparently, I'm fighting my cat there, by the Romans. Archaeological remains of crucified body found in an ossuary near Jerusalem dating from the time of Christ indicated that the nails were gathered around iron spikes approximately 5 to 7 inches long with a square shaft. Furthermore, findings of the Shroud of Turin have documented that the nails commonly driven through with the wrist rather than the palms. And I'll show in this picture here, see where the nail is driven through the wrist, and the size of the nail, not the palms. The palms would rip. It would not hold the hand. It would not hold it. After both arms were fixed to the crossbar, the victim together were lifted into the stripes. On the low cross, 4 soldiers would accomplish relatively easy. However, on the top cross, the soldiers either wooden forks or ladders, meaning the top of the cross, because they raised the cross up. Next, the feet were fixed to the cross either by nails or ropes. Findings in the Shroud of Turin suggested that nailing was the preferred Roman practice. Although his feet would be fixed to the sides of stripes or to a wooden footrest, they usually were nailed directly to the front of the stripes. Sipes, as it's called. To accomplish this, flexion of the knees may have been quite prominent, and the bent legs may have rotated literally. It shows you right there in this diagram. See how they would have raised his feet up, where they would have nailed it? Because remember, he's going to be laying either one of 2 positions on the cross. See how they got the body twisted? Either way, because you wouldn't be able to pull up. He's got to, they're making it as painful as it's the way he's got to pull himself up to breathe even on the cross. The length of the nail would generally range from 3 to 4. They would merely be survival on the range for 3 to 4 hours on the cross, or to 3 or 4 days, depending on the severity of the scourging. However, even if the scourging had been terribly mild, the Roman soldiers would hasten the death by breaking the legs below the knees. That's why the necks are at an angle. So when they go around in the evening and break the legs, they suffocate, basically is what they do. Not uncommonly, insects would light upon or burrow into the open wounds or eyes, ears, and nose of the dying and helpless victim, and birds of prey would tear at their sights. Moreover, it was customary to leave the corpse on the cross to be devoured by predatory animals. However, Roman law, the family condemned could take the body for burial, obtaining permission from the Roman judge. Since no one was intended to survive crucifixion, of course, the body was not released to the family until the soldiers were sure that the victim was dead. By custom, one of the Roman guards would pierce the body with a sword or lance. Traditionally, this had been considered a spear wound to the heart through the right side of the chest, a fatal wound probably taught to most Roman soldiers. The Shroud of Turin documents this form of injury. Moreover, the standard infantry spear, which was 5 to 6 foot long, would easily have reached the chest of a man crucified on a customary low cross. So I'm back to make a video about Jesus Christ's medical aspects of the cross. So this is graphic, but it's there to show you what Christ suffered for us. A lot of times I hear from people, it's like, they talk about a God. Why would a God allow this and God allow this? God allowed Christ to come in human form to save us for what he did on the cross. And I can't take away how big that was. He still had the human side to him. And so he felt pain like we feel pain. And for someone who spent 21 years in the military, I was 8 years Air Force before I was 13 years Army National Guard in the infantry. I was a life support specialist, and we made the only a POW training camp on Guam years ago. I was on Guam for almost 2 years. One of my first assignments. And we taught POW training in jungle warfare and water survival training there. And the pain that we learned in POW training, it's what they used POWs in Vietnam years before. Pain does a lot of things to the body. So to see and know the pain that he went through, pain that I couldn't endure. And he could have stepped off that cross any time. And that's why I stress to people, Jesus Christ could have stepped off that cross. He didn't have to be there. He chose to be there. It was a choice. And he did it for us. God sacrificed for us. So I don't take it lightly. And this is why I want to open your minds to the truth. God bless.